morning. It was the year 520 BC. Darius the Great, that's the Persian, not the Mede, was ruling over a very large empire of Persia, which encompassed Israel. Conditions were not brilliant in Israel. Quite a lot of people had returned from Babylon to rebuild the temple, but things weren't going very well. They had bad harvests because of droughts, and so an attitude developed among them, and it's mentioned in Haggai chapter 1, verse 2, where the Lord said, "These people say the time has not yet come to rebuild the house of the Lord." They were saying, look, we've had opposition, so God doesn't want us to build it just yet. So instead, they decided to build their own houses. And they made them very nice and panelled them, and this was what it was important to them. But they didn't really have enough to eat. So God raised up Haggai and Zechariah to chivvy them up and say, look, you've got to rebuild the temple because it's got to be ready with true worship in time for the Messiah to come and teach you the right ways. Now, the book of Haggai is very straightforward, and he explains how God is going to raise up two people to take the lead. One was Joshua, descended from the high priest, the tribe of Levi, who was going to be the high priest, and Zerubbabel was going to be the governor. Now, Zerubbabel was descended from David, and he was also an ancestor of Jesus Christ, an ancestor of both Joseph and Mary. But he wasn't made king because the Persian king was ruling over Israel. However, Zerubbabel was going to be governor, and these two were going to lead people kindly. So they had a new heavens in that they had a new government. They no longer had kings who were corrupt and serving God and the people for their own ends, but no, they now had two good people taking the lead. Now, the book of Zechariah is very different to Haggai. It's full of symbolism. You've got horses of different colours, you've got horns and craftsmen and a flying scroll, all of which help us to envisage what God is trying to teach us. But there's one vision I would like to look at, Zechariah chapter 4, where Zechariah sees a lampstand of pure gold. It's beautiful. On top there was a bowl with 7 lamps around the outside, and beside it were 2 olive trees. So what did it mean? Well, we know that olives produce oil, and oil represents God's Spirit. So this was the important principle for the Jews to understand, that they weren't the ones, their power was not what was going to build the temple, but this was it. Chapter 4 and verse 6. "Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord." Only with God's help, with God directing affairs, would they successfully rebuild this temple. Now, that's true of today. It's pointless us going out preaching unless we have God's Spirit. But how do we get God's Spirit? Chapter 7 talks about some people who came to Zechariah and said, shall we carry on with the fasting that we used to do before we went to Babylon? And Zechariah says those fasts and those sacrifices that you made were pointless because you weren't obeying the spirit of the law. And this is the spirit of God's law and the Mosaic law. Chapter 7 and verse 9. "Render true judgments, show kindness and mercy to one another. Do not oppress the widow, the fatherless, the sojourner, or the poor. Let none of you devise evil against another in your heart." Sacrifices of the Israelites, or our sacrifices of preaching these days, are pointless unless we obey this principle. Now, Watchtower, I would like you to take notice of this, because your judgments are dire. You don't understand the 2-witness rule because you're so busy building that you haven't the time to look at the scriptures properly and understand the ramifications of that rule. You don't allow people in your man-made judicial system to have a proper defence. The way that you've hurt people is so bad. You don't obey God's law, that the governments are to deal with crimes. And because you have gone your own way, developed your own laws, you have hurt a tremendous amount of people. So what's going to be the outcome? Chapter 8 of Zechariah and verse 16. The Lord said to the Jews, speak truth to one another. Render in your gates judgments that are true. Make for peace. Don't devise evil in your hearts. Because if you don't do these things, all these things I hate, declares the Lord. There's no hope for you, Watchtower, if you carry on with your dreadful judicial system. You need to change. You need to say you're sorry. You cannot keep sweeping things under the carpet and twisting the scriptures to try to make yourselves look good when you know that you have acted badly. So is there any hope for any of us? Yes, there is. There's a new heavens and a new earth coming for us. And it's going to be far better than the new heavens and new earth that was over the Jews of their day. Chapter 8 and verse 12. The vine shall give its fruit, the ground shall give its produce, the heavens shall give their due. No more drought. These things will come. But if we want to be there, we will render justice, mercy, faithfulness, and loving kindness. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you all.